But
I would like to answer that, Afeef.
yes, please.
I think coaching, the people who are really coaching the leaders in organizations, they have a big responsibility. They have a huge responsibility. Irrespective of the experience that our leaders carry today, this being an unprecedented situation, they're all overwhelmed as to how to really deal with this,
Mhm.
right? And I think um, these executive coaches really come in picture over here to really help them understand um, how different this is going to be and how they really need to adapt to the situation. So there, they really need to understand the business also well, and then understand the leader well, understand where the leader comes from, and I think they need to really match it up in such a way that the leader understands that he is doing whatever he is doing, it is doing for the business as well as for the betterment of the people, because that is going to stay for a long time. So they have a big responsibility, is what I feel. There can be different aspects to it as to what kind of advice they would give them, what kind of mentoring they would provide to the leadership team in all these organizations, because I still see many organizations being more worried about business. Yes, business is definitely something that we all need to be worried about, but I think important point is, do we have the people to run the businesses ultimately? Are we really compromising too much on the people lives? So this is
Mhm.
something that we need to sensitize the leaders to, many of whom are still not probably sensitized to that need. So that's where coaching really comes into play. I'm sure there are many
Great.
aspects that maybe others also can point out.
Great. I know a couple of companies that have approached, I think, Boston Consulting Group or some of the larger consulting organizations, and they went to them with the situation and problem that they're facing right now. And they had another organization which is also facing another kind of situation. But these two organizations were able to marry their situation, or rather, they just sort of looked at what was somebody's issue was actually somebody's need, and vice versa. Someone was had excessive staffing and somebody needed staffing. Somebody was paying employees and they're sort of facing a burnout, and somebody needed employees and they were willing to take over 40% of the payment that the other company had to make, right? So I think that's very interesting, because this is also a time where I've seen competitors also try and collaborate and see out of perspective. And like you mentioned, um, sometimes when we get when we look at these areas from a third person's perspective, from an external consultant or a coach, I think it sort of opens up a lot of avenues as well, right? So it'll be great if each one of you can share what is one piece of advice or suggestion that you have for everyone out there. Yeah, good.
Yeah, so let me answer. I think, Afeef, you know my background. I'm more of an accidental HR head, right? I've just been doing it as an interim role because I thought I had always been on the business side, and I thought, we need to run the HR the way businesses are run, not like, as an advisor function. So that was my intent of taking over the HR role. As I said, this was more of an interim, and I would like to believe I've been successful. That's what the feedback I get. So I think what really made it work was largely, again, the connect with the business in the end. I think we are there to support and to grow the business, right? Not to sort of create the bottlenecks or create the problems and trying to overcomplicate. A lot of times, I think that's what happens with a lot of the HR concepts. We try to overcomplicate the organization. I think that's what, especially, I think the most of the folks are going to be from that background. I think that's one piece of advice I would like to give based on my personal experience of being on the HR side and then being on the business side.
Great. And like I mentioned earlier, you wear so many hats, so it's great to see that you actually need of those hats. And thanks for those words again, Anuj. Anila, some words from your side.
Yeah, from me, if it's for leadership team, I think they should take time to focus on the organization's health and culture. And employees, I think we should give employees a voice to share their thoughts and act on solutions, which is very important. And also for them to feel they've been kind of taken care of, they've been cared for. And big advice to facilities to kind of take time to consider what changes or enhancements are needed for the office setup when they really need to bring in employees back to office.
Okay, great. In fact, there's one organization that I've been consulting, which of course is going through a drastic slowdown. It's in the travel segment again. It was in the news recently, and so employees were very unhappy with the way things were, and a lot of them were asked to leave. So they wanted to have a town hall. So one of the questions that were asked that was asked to the employees is, what are you willing to do for your employer? Okay, I think that's a pretty empowering question itself. It's not to tell them, hey, listen, we've given you this and now it's time for you to give back, but it sort of, there was silence for almost, close to 15, 20 seconds. And then we had very interesting responses that came up from the group, right? So I think that could also be a trend where we also help people figure out how they can also bring value to the organization in whatever shape or form they can. Yeah, great. Ridha, any word from your side, please?
I guess HR will have to play a big role in, pushing the CEOs to look at different perspectives. HRs really have to put in their foot in the business decisions as much more than what they would have done before. I think the cliche of strategic business partner needs to take a different definition altogether. I think that's very important. Like what Anuj was saying, I think important to really understand the business and be able to really do what HR is expected to do, because you are so close to the workforce. You are trying to bridge gap between the management and the workforce, and your role is very critical in terms of really pushing the positive message across the organization, both to the employees as well as to the management. So I think HR has a big role over there, and they should start with that, making CEOs more open to ideas, more open to looking at different aspects of working models and all of that, right? Which probably is still a miss. Having that emotional connect with employees, right? I think HR has to really step up in terms of being able to provide the right kind of counseling. These are uncertain situations, and a lot of people are going to have a huge amount of insecurity, anxiety, and they do not know what the future holds for them, right? Whether they should really invest in some, really go for a big expense or not is something first on their mind. So I guess we really need to be able to see how we can try to create a positive environment. I know some of these CHROs are going to have a tough time, specifically from your travel, hospitality industry, and a lot of other industries who are directly affected by this COVID scenario. But somewhere HR will still have to step up and be able to connect to each and every employee till the last mile, like even Tanu was mentioning. So that's one of the key things HR will have.
Great. So we're seeing priorities have been changing, or the right priorities have been coming up in front, right? So thanks for that, Ridha. Tanu, a final word before we we end the session today.
Sure. Afeef, we personally believe that number one, cost is there as a temporary, but not as a temporary but a permanent measure. Definitely we need to realize that. Second, we need to win hearts and minds by the proper empathetic procedures in our space. We also believe that the value of retention is now ever higher than before, I would say, and handling mental stress of teams is going to be extremely important as far as HR is concerned. Lastly, I also feel that HR needs to insulate confidence through his teams. Either for us, it's clinicians and nurses and other employees, so that message can be percolated to the customer or to patient that you are in the right space, you are in the right hands, and we can take you forward from here. So that message has to be insulated through your staff to the customers or patients in whichever way, I would say, to boost up confidence.
Great. And hopefully this sort of percolates to the entire ecosystem, right? From schools and families, different education institutions. We're able to instill a lot of these values right at a very grassroots level as well.
Yeah.
So Anila, Anuj, Ridha, and Tanu, thank you so much. It's been an honor and a privilege having you share your thoughts. The extensive amount of experience and expertise that you come with. I'm very sure all of us, I definitely learned a lot, and a lot of non-HR, non-business folks who can actually take back a lot of things from what you've shared. So once again, it's an honor and a privilege. Thank you for being on our show today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having. Thank you.
Thank you.